Moving on to adhesives. What's the number one thing you need to know about wood glue? Don't eat it. No, I'm kidding. It glues wood together. This is Titebond, the original wood glue. They make Titebond 2 and Titebond 3. Does it really matter? It does whenever you get out to the pointy end of the spear, right? If we're playing in the NBA, if we're playing in if we're a runner in a marathon, how many people run in the Boston Marathon? Thousands of people. How many of them are within 5 seconds of the person who wins?
3, maybe.
3 or 5. Okay? When we're talking about glue applications, there's 3 or 5 applications of glue. When we get out the fastest runners, when we start talking about the fastest runners, then we're talking about which wood glue we're using. If we're talking about all the rest of the runners, it doesn't matter. Go to the store. Why do I buy Titebond instead of Titebond 2? It's cheaper. It's less expensive. Do I have a bottle of Titebond 2 over there? Yeah. Why do I have a bottle of Titebond 2 on the shelf in the shop? What's that? No. For the third runner? Yeah, for the third runner. No. It was on sale, or they were out of the regular Titebond. So the difference in price between Titebond and Titebond 2 is like a couple bucks for a gallon. So, but you know, so I was working at the Playhouse Park, and I had to. I was given the task of we were out of wood glue. I said, go call the people and get the wood glue. And so I went in, and I called up, scrolled through the thing, found the glue vendor, called the glue vendor up on the phone, said, hey, we need 8 gallons of glue. And they're like, okay. And sent the courier service over to pick up the glue and bring it to the shop, right? And so the glue showed up and it was white. And the guys were complaining. They're like, this is white glue. So I called the people up and I said, why did you send us white glue? I said, that's what we had. You wanted 8 gallons of glue, you needed it yesterday, we sent you what we had. I said, well, what's the difference between the white and the yellow? I said, well, in that particular glue, the difference between the white and the yellow is the yellow has yellow food coloring in it to make it yellow. So there was no difference between the white glue. Now, if you buy a bottle of Titebond wood glue and you buy a bottle of Titebond white glue, there is a difference in the two glues. They're largely the same. They're pretty much, you can use them interchangeably for most of what you're doing, but sometimes you do want the white glue. But it's very similar glue. Okay. And Titebond is just one of the manufacturers. You see, we got some Elmer's, we got some Gorilla. It's all pretty much the same chemical formulation. Adhesive. Comes in a tube. Look, we have tubes. I should grab some stuff. We got some liquid nails projects, strong durable bonds most common building materials. We've got wall-based adhesive. What is wall-based adhesive for? Look, wall-based. See this little rubber thing at the floor? If you walk in pretty much any commercial building in the world, you're going to see wall-based, sometimes called coat-based. It's rubber, and this is the adhesive that you use. Why do you use this adhesive and not any one of these others? Because it's made for that. It's chemically formulated to glue to the rubber to a variety of other materials. But the big thing is it sticks to the rubber. Most of these other adhesives won't. It either won't stick, or it will have a chemical reaction with the rubber in it, and it will cause it to dissolve or other things like that. When you're using this stuff, you want to make sure that one of the big things is foam. If I take this piece of foam right here, this is extruded polystyrene. If I take this piece of extruded polystyrene and I take this liquid nails projects, actually not that one. Actually, both of these are okay, but there is product out there made by Liquid Nails that if I squirt it on here, saw this happen one night. We were going to lunch, or I was working for a theater company, it was getting up on lunchtime. We need to glue this, we're going to glue this piece of foam on this thing so that when we came back from lunch, we could move on to the next step of the process. So guy went over to the cabinet, got the tube of cup, came over here, stuck it on there. It looks great. For that for lunch, we came back. This was laying on the floor. Why was it on the floor? And it had this big, like somebody had carved the back of it out of it. Because there was a solvent in the adhesive that dissolved the foam. So it just dissolved away. It stuck for a bit until this stuff melted, literally melted. And so be careful, make sure that whatever product you're using, same way with the coat base, if I put this on the coat base, it's not going to stick because it just doesn't. So make sure that whatever you're squirting on there is compatible with your material that you're doing. And it comes in a variety. How many people use one of these? Yeah, okay. Put it in there, put that in there, cut the point off, squirt on, makes great stuff. Okay. So many variations on the theme. If you ever want to have a course in painting your house, the interior of your house, come talk to me and we'll talk about caulking guns and how all the tips and tricks of making that part of your process work. Mike taught me really well. Spray adhesive. Look, 3 different kinds. Why do we have different kinds? What's that? Different things. We just talked about the same thing we just talked about. Different materials, different compatibilities, things like that. This is my two favorites are Super 77 and High Strength 90. These are 2 products made by 3M. The beautiful thing about Super 77 is that it will glue pretty much anything together. If I spray one surface of this, if I take this and I spray it and I stick it on there, I can pull it off and move it around and stick it back pretty easily. If I spray both surfaces and let it dry just a little bit, then I stick them together, it's going to be pretty much stuck. This stuff, you spray that crap on there, it ain't coming apart. You stick it on there, it's stuck. If you put it on there crooked, it's going to be on there crooked because that's how this stuff works. So I use both of these because these are the ones I have experience with. I've used these so much over the course of my career. And they're available. You can just buy them. Pretty much any store you walk into is going to have these 2 versions of these 2 numbers of spray foam or spray glue, and they work. If I move into other brands, I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know how well it's going to work. I don't know all that stuff. This is some stuff that we got from it was left over from a project. This will foam rubber. This works really well on foam rubber. You spray it on foam rubber, then stick the foam rubber to some other things. This was free. They had some pens left over and they just left them behind, and so it's really good stuff. Not inexpensive stuff. And again, a variety of manufacturers. It's basically rubber cement. It's basically rubber. How many of you have used rubber cement in your life before? It's basically rubber cement that has a bunch of solvent in it, put in a can, so you can spray it. That's really what it comes down to.
Pause.
Go.
I need you to explain the word solvent, and then I need you to give us some examples of when you would use spray adhesive in scenery.
Solvent. What's the universal solvent of the earth?
Water.
Water. Who said that? Are you a chemistry person? Okay. Water is a universal solvent. What does that mean? It dissolves almost every. If I take a bucket of water and I put a chocolate bar in there, what's going to happen?
Well, it depends on the temperature of the water.
Eventually, it's going to turn into. It's not going to be a chocolate bar anymore. It's going to break down and be goopy water. If I put dirt in there, what's it going to do? Turn to mud. If I put, I'm trying to think of other examples that you put in water. What's that?
Oh, I said butter.
Butter is a terrible example, but good point. What's that?
Concrete powder.
Concrete powder. If I put any powdered substance in there, what's it going to do? It's going to dissolve it. It's going to make it into a liquid. It's going to dissolve the solid into a liquid. So that's what a solvent is. If I take a how many of you have used fingernail polish remover? What is fingernail polish remover? A solvent. Meaning that if I paint it on, I painted my fingernail, it's got paint on it that is hard, I can scrape that off. But if I want it to come off really cleanly, I put nail polish remover on there, it dissolves the paint, and so that I can wipe the paint off, right? That's what a solvent is. It dissolves a solid. Was that a good enough explanation? Why does spray adhesive have a solvent in it? It's rubber cement. If we take rubber, if we have rubber, we just put rubber cement on the table, what's it going to turn? It's going to turn into rubber. It's going to be hard. So we put a solvent in it to dissolve it, to make it a liquid. Then we put it in a can and pressurize it so we can spray it. Then when we spray it, what happens to the solvent? No. What did you say?
It's gonna like dry up, and so then it's gonna harden.
It's going to say dry up in a different way.
It evaporates.
It evaporates.
Mm-hmm.
So the solvent is, when we think about paint, when we think about glue, when we think about spray adhesive, all of those are a liquid that are going to turn into a solid. We take a bucket of paint, we dip our paintbrush in there, we paint it on the wall. The water that's in the paint, typically, the solvent that's in the paint that makes it liquid, evaporates and it turns into a hard layer. Okay? We call that the vehicle. When we're talking about compounds like glues and paints and things like that, it has a vehicle in it, which is a solvent that evaporates. So when we spray the spray adhesive on there, the solvent then evaporates and causes it to get hard. Okay? Sometimes when we use things like, how many of you have ever used PVC tubing, glued PVC tubing together? Not very many of you. That's a terrible example, because most people relate to that. The quick story there is that whenever you're gluing PVC tubing together, you're actually melting, it's a chemical reaction. You're putting a solvent on there that softens the plastic, makes it liquid, and then you stick the two pieces of plastic together, and then they form to be one piece. They're actually bonded together chemically. But the solvent is what evaporates. You put it on there, and then it actually melts the plastic and then evaporates, and then it re-solidifies. That wasn't the best example. Is that enough about solvents? Mm-hmm. Okay. What was the other thing you had?
An example of when you would use spray adhesive in scenery.
To glue foam onto something else. It's a really good adhesive for that. It's a contact cement, so I can use it to glue anything, a lot of things together. For gluing fabric onto a piece of wood. One of the big things I use it for, which is not really a standard, I use a drafting program to draw pictures of things, and sometimes we need to cut something out, and so I'll print that off on the big printer in full scale. So I have a piece of paper that's 10 feet long and 2 feet wide, and I'll bring it down to the shop, and we'll spray the piece of material with spray adhesive, and then we'll glue the piece of paper down to it. And then we'll take the saw and follow the lines on the piece of paper to cut out the piece of cement. So that's one of the other things. To glue wallpaper on things, to do fabric on things, all kinds of stuff. I'm trying to think the last thing I used it on scenery. It was probably to glue a piece of paper on a template onto a piece of wood. Upholstery, all kinds of different things like that.
Lightweight things.
Lightweight things, yeah. This area, very thin connection. It won't fill a void, things like that.